I would like to try. So I love what you're saying. And I think it's slightly different than the premise of the episode, which is what you said in the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I think I know how to frame it for you in a way that would get after kind of a little bit into the practice theory. Is I know nothing or very little about jazz standards. I've certainly listened to some of the greats, but not nearly as much as I probably should if that was a desire of mine. So let's say you were my teacher and you assign me something like Autumn Leaves or Four. I only know like the very, very, very basic standards, or Donna Lee or something. How would you go about structuring my ability to use that standard and the working on that standard to just develop the skills that I want to develop? Does that difference? Like you're talking about, I have these skills, here's how I would go about working through it. What about when you want to use a standard to develop those skills themselves?
Sure. Well, and that's a great question. It's what we kind of do in our jazz program. Most jazz programs are repertoire based. So, which is also, I mean, it's the same premise. You can say, I've got these skills, I'm going to attack the repertoire, or you can take the repertoire and say, I'm going to use it to teach me to be a better musician, or to create a template for learning. So, the type of thing that we're going to do in our lessons is, if you were one of my students here, is that we would do some transcription, and transcription is sort of a long word. Again, it's a word that obscures really what you're doing, because it sounds like somebody that's a court reporter, or it's somebody that's doing a non-fun thing. You just play along with somebody you're playing. So we'll take, for instance, first semester, we might listen to Autumn Leaves. We'll listen to Chet Baker play Autumn Leaves. We'll listen to Miles Davis play Autumn Leaves. And we'll learn the melody by playing along by ear with Autumn Leaves. We'll also try to take off some of the harmony and create our own chord sheet. We're also at some point going to try to look at a good lead sheet that will give us some direction in terms of what other people, what the rhythm section might be actually thinking or playing at this moment. And then we're going to go through and we're going to look at the first, the process being, it's fairly standardized throughout, sort of jazz teaching, for better or for worse. But we're going to learn the melody along, and sort of like basically you practice channeling or mimicking or
just copying
the masters. Yeah, copying the masters. So, and then maybe we'll listen to I put together folders of tune. So let's say the tune would be Autumn Leaves, but I might have 10 different versions. Now, my wife is a orchestral French horn player, and I know that when she was, she played many years up in Dayton, here in the Dayton Philharmonic, on second horn, and then was, subbed with Cincinnati a lot in the pops and ballet and everything. When she knew she was going to be playing Bruckner 7, she went out and got as many copies of recordings of Bruckner 7 to inform possible tempo, possible interpretation style. How does Cleveland do it? How does Nashville do it? That's the one that happened to be in the public library, not because she went looking for Nashville. It would just happen to be one of them. What is the, New York Philharmonic? How do they go about it? So that you have some choices. And that's a great way to think of it. So even if it's all transferable, by the way. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's jazz. One thing I did with my classical students, my last two jobs were classical trumpet jobs, but would listen to, I took the identifying information off, I think 8 Haydn expositions. I made MP3s. I cut them, I edited them out. And I said, one of them was Alison Balsam, one was Reinhold Friedrich, one was Crispin Steele Perkins, one was Maurice Andre, one was Timothy Darkschitzer. And I took all the information off, and I just said 8, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Which ones do you like? And I know I created a template in Sibelius with no marking. So I just had the notes of just the first page of the Haydn. And I said, put in the articulations that you're hearing in the one that you like, because you're going to have 8 different articulations, slurs and tongues and shorts and longs. And this is similar in jazz. It's learning music from listening to great references and masters. So we would do that. Then we would actually, that would be by ear learning the solo. There would be nothing written down. Once you can play the solo and the melody without looking at anything, then you start the process of writing things down. Then you include the chord changes, and then we do analysis, and we look at the solos, and we break them down, and we find things that are considered language, things that are common or common types of. They may be patterns or melodic phrases or cliches or quotes or things, and start to get under the hood and see. I heard it described as sort of a 3-step process. Identification, that's cool. What is it? And then figuring out how to do it in context. So you take some of that material, you practice it in a repetitious way with a track or with a metronome at different tempos and different keys. And then you practice using some of that language in the same tune at first. That's not a recipe for success necessarily. It's just something that is to be done.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people learn so differently. There's no one template for learning jazz or teaching it for that matter. So in the meantime, while students are essentially figuring out how to teach themselves, we show them all these different avenues. They're sort of entry points. If you think of like the center of being like your own way of learning, you're trying to get into that. And you may not come into that and that central way of learning in the way that you're being taught. And so, or you may grasp certain concepts and others are lost or not reaching you. And so the students, we come back to the students where it's their responsibility, hopefully, to figure out how they learn.
Yeah.
And then you work on how to learn in a more joyful and interesting way, because the thing that gets, if it becomes sterile, we want to figure out how to make this interesting and then keep coming back to the idea that this is really cool.